Hello, in this session we're going to be talking about why children arrive in the care system, what is the role of social services and social workers. Let's start here, trying to raise a happy, healthy, well-balanced young person. This young person is going to need to experience certain things in their life. They're going to need to be nurtured, they're going to need to be taken care of, fed, protected, clothed, they're going to need to be safeguarded, given opportunity for an education, have positive role models around them, and parents or adults who love them. And if a young person, a child, is wrapped in all this in its formative years, by the time they're 17 or 18, you should really have a pretty well-balanced young person who is ready to start looking at adult life from a solid platform. Ready perhaps to move into their own flat and be able to stand on their own 2 feet and take care of themselves with some additional support from home and family. Now, some children receive that and some children do not. Some children receive this, a bad childhood, which would look at neglect and various forms of abuse. So we're going to look at the effect that this has on a young person. Now, sometimes some people will say that their childhood was like this. This is what they received. All that good stuff and all the nurturing and the loving family and the opportunities. And it's not necessarily based around wealth, because I'm sure you all know lots of good, solid people who came out of homes that were not particularly wealthy, but what they had was the basics: nurturing, food, clothes, safety, shelter, education, someone to look after them, someone to safeguard them, and to make sure that they felt loved. So some people say that this was their childhood. They had a good childhood. Some people will say they had that along the scale. Some people will say they had that or that. It kind of comes along in increments. Now, when it starts getting over here towards a bad childhood, some people will say, well, I had this. Some people will say I had that, and some people will say I had this. It was an awful childhood. It was rough. It was abusive. It was harsh. Everybody in their childhood received something along that line. And what you could do is you could mentally project your own childhood on that line, and it would end up somewhere between a good childhood or a bad childhood. Now, these children here, social services don't have anything to do with these children generally. This is because they are deemed to be having a good enough childhood not to need any injection from social services. So, the only time social services may get involved in this childhood here is perhaps if there's been a bereavement, a double bereavement. Both mum and dad are gone, and there's nobody in the extended family who can take the children in and look after them. Hence, they end up in social services care. Other than that, generally these children do not have anything to do with social services. Now, who are social services? Social services are the government arm that deal with social care problems and issues in this country. And an oversimplified explanation as to how it works. Local government, let me get around here, local government allocate a certain sum of money to tackle social care issues in the country. This money is divided amongst the local authorities across the land. This local authority, for example, may be saying, is this the money that we have for this year to tackle our social care problems? And the answer that they get back from central government is, yes, that's all the money there is. And the local authority will say, but we have more problems this year than we had last year. We had more people who need help. But you've left the money the same, or you've even reduced it in some cases. How are we supposed to manage? And the answer is, well, you just have to manage because that's all the money. There is no more. So this local authority takes its portion of the money and it splits it up into the different areas that need help. For example, this could be care of the elderly. This could be care of people with disabilities and special needs, and this could be care of children in the care system. So, the care system, who are looking after children, they're saying, is this the money for this year? And the local authority is saying, yeah, that's the money. And they're saying, well, we have more children, more problems than we had last year. How are we supposed to manage? And the answer from the local authority is, well, you'll have to manage because that's all there is. There's no more money. So what you have is a care system which is currently underfunded. This causes issues, as you'll see, when social workers are trying to get budgets increased for children. Now, let's look at the social workers. When a young person comes into care, this young person is allocated a social worker who places a team of people around them to take care of their welfare. So here's your social worker, SW. The social worker has to find them a place to stay, which will be a children's home or a foster home or a semi-independence unit, but they have to find a place to stay, a place to live. Okay, I'll put home there. Somebody has to look after the educational welfare of this young person. Somebody has to look after the physical welfare of the young person. So you're looking at perhaps a GP. Somebody has to look after the mental health of the young person. So we'll say the mental health team, or CAMS, Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services. The family may still be involved in decision making, and also if there is any criminal activity, well then you may have the police or the youth offending team, all involved in the decision making for this young person. Now, all these decisions have to be made for the best interest of the young person. That's the core reason for making these decisions. A social worker is supposed to have around about 25 caseloads, which is a young person to visit once every 6 weeks, and also to coordinate all the rest of these meetings around the young person. They're supposed to have 25 cases. Some social workers say that they have 30 cases. Some that say they have 40. Some say they have 50. And the highest I've heard is 62. So a social worker may find themselves swamped and struggling to deal with the number of cases that they have to look after. The reason I'm telling you this is so that you don't get despondent about the job. Sometimes you may feel that the actual care system itself is fighting you while you're trying to fight for this young person and help this young person. You may find yourself asking for extra budgets because this young person's got a hobby or something they like to do, and when you pass this information up the chain, it goes up to your line manager, up to their social worker, who may be asking for more budgets, but the answer is, sorry, there's no more money. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, if this young person had extra money, they could spend more time doing things that they liked instead of getting in trouble, taking drugs and getting involved with the police. That's just frustrations. There's nothing you can do about it because that's just the system that you're working in. Following this along here, we're saying that social services interaction with this child probably won't begin until it's somewhere down here. Now I'll explain to you the different stages in an oversimplified way. If social services get involved there, early intervention, it may be like this. They approach the family because somebody has reported the family or is concerned about what's going on, and they say, look, we're concerned about your children, concerned about the welfare of your kids. We would like to offer you some family support. So they send in a family support worker who will go in, spend time with the family, help them with budgeting skills, parenting skills, help them with managing the home, help them to make sure the kids get an education, and try and get the family back on track. Now, this family support worker, after a number of months, may come and report perhaps to a panel who say, how is this family getting along? And if the family support worker says, do you know what, this family are doing really, really well. The parents are responding very well, and they are taking on board the things that we've said, and there's positive changes being made there, and we can see a great improvement. Well, if that's the case, the next stage would be to withdraw from that family and just observe, perhaps from a distance. That's all that's required. If the intervention is further along the line, say here, what may be happening then is the social services, a social worker approaches the family and says, we're concerned about the welfare of your children. We think the best thing to do is to bring them into the care system on a temporary basis. Now that means we will house them and look after them. You can still see them and they can still see you. They can come and visit, but we'll offer you some family support and help you with the interactions in your family. And again, after maybe 6 months or 8 months or maybe even a year or maybe even longer, the social workers can go back to the panel and say, this family is doing much better. Interactions between the parents are better, things seem much more safe and stable. Well, the next stage then is to send the children back home to live with their parents. Intervention that's further in, say here, may be that the social workers are saying to the parents, because we're concerned about your children, we think the best thing to do, and we've been to court and got a court order, is to bring them into the care system on a long-term basis, which means they'll be with us until they are 18. You can still see them, they can still see you, but we will be the main carers until they become adults. And intervention all the way here, well, this is perhaps where social workers are saying to the parents, because we are so concerned about the welfare of your children, we are going to remove them permanently, and they'll be taken into care. They'll be long-term fostered or adopted, but you as parents will not have access to these children again. Once they're 18 and they leave care, it's up to them if they want to come and find you, but you will have no access to these children whatsoever. So these are just some of the routes, some of the ways that children end up in the care system. I've oversimplified this because there's many other ways that they can end up in the care system. For example, a parent or parents can approach social services and say, we can't cope with these children. We can't manage. I can't do it. I'm not in a good enough place myself to be able to raise these children in the way that they need to be raised. So I'm handing them over to you and asking if you will take care of them. So that's how sometimes children end up in the care system. Children themselves can approach social services and say, I am not safe at home. And obviously there would need to be an investigation, but they can refer themselves into care, which sometimes happens. There's all different reasons why children end up in the care system. But this is the care system, an oversimplified view. It's funded by central government. The funds are sometimes decreasing and sometimes not keeping up with the need. And then you've got overworked social workers, and this causes them to not be able to keep up with the demands of the children. Sometimes you may hear young people saying, why am I on my 4th social worker in 6 months? And this is because what should happen is one social worker should stay with a young child, with a young person, for a suitable length of time to build bonds of trust and be able to get to know that person. But if social workers are being moved around and going off sick with stress and leaving the job, well, this is why you've got this constant movement. So again, this is an oversimplified view of why children end up in the care system. And in the next segment, we're going to be talking about what's going on down here and looking at different forms of abuse and neglect that happen to children in the care system.